Mediumship has a physical side to it. And on today's show, we're going to be covering a very special topic. Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. It's an opportunity for me to have a special guest on the show. We usually have a discussion relating to either spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And it's always an adventure to see where the conversation takes us over the course of an hour. And I do encourage people to tune in, like as I said, on my Facebook page. This will go on to the Lilydale Assembly Facebook page as well as my YouTube channel. And if you are a listen-only kind of person for podcasts, you may enjoy listening on blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale Radio. I'm part of the Lilydale Radio family, and there are lots of shows that happen throughout the week, so I encourage you to tune into those. And this is year 6 of Wednesdays with Willa, so you've got lots of episodes to catch up on. If this is your first show, I've had so many great guests, and Neal Rzepkowski, who's my guest today, has been on before. Thanks for being here today, Neal.
Thank you for inviting me.
Neal has, throughout the years, brought a lot of beautiful things to Lilydale and to this show. We've covered things having to do with Native American ceremonies, Jesus, mediumship, and he is well versed in mediumship, having been formerly a registered medium. He's also a retired family doctor. He's a former certified medium of the Forever Family organization. And he is a lover of all things mediumship, including our topic today, which is trumpet mediumship. Some of you have probably never heard of trumpet mediumship. We're not talking about bugles. We're not talking about any of those trombone mediumship. That's not where we're taking it today. We're taking a bit of a dive into a side of mediumship known as physical mediumship. And there are various branches of that, but today we're going to just be focusing on trumpet mediumship. And Neal even has some props to show for you today, so you have a better sense of what we're talking about. So let's take it away, Neal.
Well, like you said, trumpet mediumship is a phase or a part of mediumship as a whole, the subject. There's 2 broad divisions of mediumship. Mental mediumship, which is where information comes through the mind of the medium and is shared with the readee, I guess you could call it, the person going for a reading or wanting a greeting from spirits. So that's mental mediumship. It comes through the mind of the medium, and the audience or the readee cannot see what's going on in the mind of the medium, obviously. And that's mental mediumship. The other is physical mediumship, which is physically evident in the physical plane. So with physical mediumship, the spirits are able to influence physical things and create phenomena or things that happen that everybody in the audience can see. Even if the reading or the information is going to one particular person, everybody sees it. Mm-hmm. So and there's many different phases of mental mediumship. There's clairvoyance, clairaudience. You've covered all these in previous shows. But there's also phases of physical mediumship, levitation, spirit lights in the room, direct voice, which is where a voice comes out of the middle of the room. Mm-hmm. But there's also trumpet mediumship, which is a phase of physical mediumship. Mm-hmm. So what happens with a physical medium? And interestingly enough, people are able to develop this. Sometimes it takes a long time, and sometimes it happens very quickly or even spontaneously with things happening that everybody can see. And certain physical mediums have a specialty. Certain ones like to create apports, which are things that appear out of thin air from one place and are brought into the seance room or the area and manifest out of what seemingly seems like thin air. Those are apports. Some mediums have a gift for that. Other mediums with trumpet are able to levitate the trumpet. Mm-hmm. We have here in Lilydale a well-known medium back in the day which is Emmy Chetkin's grandmother, Minnie O'Hara. And she was able to have her spirit team, because there's usually many spirits that work with the medium. The spirit team would levitate a trumpet, and I'll show you trumpets so you know what we're talking about, because they're not, like you said, they're not trombones, they're not real, what the typical orchestra trumpet is. This would be a trumpet that is used by spirit. It's like a megaphone, so spirit will talk through this. This particular trumpet, they're long. This one is divided into 3 sections, so it's kind of a collapsible trumpet. We call this a seance trumpet, and this is usually the size that you see in a typical trumpet seance. So what happens is, during the seance, there is a substance called ectoplasm, which comes from the medium's body, and there's energy also from the sitters, or those around witnessing this phenomenon, that are combined to create a psychokinetic force to make the trumpet levitate. And then there's to amplify the spirit's information, they put a ectoplasmic, energetic voice box or larynx into the trumpet. Air flows through that to make a sound, and you hear an amplification of the sound coming out this way. So that's one style of trumpet, and I'll get back to that in a moment. That's the typical, usual. Oh, and because I was mentioning Minnie O'Hara, who was able to raise these trumpets in broad daylight in her backyard, in her garden. So these would be floating, several of these.
And it's a
would be floating
lightweight metal,
too. It's aluminum. It's a lightweight metal. So these would be, usually trumpet mediumship begins in total darkness. And the reason is the energetic photon, I don't know what you want to call it, it's beyond physical, but the energy that is used to do this dissipates in light. It's sort of, I've seen ectoplasm, and once exposed to light, it's like soap bubbles going all very quickly. So to stabilize that takes a spirit team that really is experienced. So when you begin trumpet mediumship, or most trumpet mediums, this happens in total darkness. Now, because it's in total darkness, the audience is not able to see where the trumpet is. They can hear sounds coming out of it, but they can't see where it is. So we put little glow bands, like this one on the tip of the trumpet, and some on the bottom of the trumpet, so you can see these bands floating around the room, so you know where the trumpet is in total darkness. They have the bioluminescence necessary, so you can follow it with your eyes. Yeah, these are luminescent trumpets. Now here, for those who are into size matters, here is that was a 3-section trumpet. This is a lightweight aluminum. There's a band we were talking about, and this is removable on this one. Sometimes they'll paint luminescent paint, but this is a 4-section trumpet, so you can see how large it is.
It's not as long as a Tibetan horn.
Exactly. Yeah. So they use this. So that's another type of seance trumpet. Both of these styles of trumpets are available in the bookstore of the National Association of Spiritualist Churches, National Spiritualist Association of Churches based in Lilydale. So lately, trumpets have been very popular sellers there because people are interested in this. More and more people are interested in this. Now, the trumpet does not have to be a lightweight aluminum. It can be made out of copper. At one time, somebody in Lilydale created copper trumpets and sold them in the Lilydale bookstore. They're no longer there. They're in the NSAC office, this style of trumpet, with the option of luminous bands to be added. Now, you can also have this is a cardboard trumpet, fancy paper on the outside. There's your luminous band. You can see the cardboard, and this is a cardboard trumpet that is also used in seances. Then we have Kai Mürgi is a German physical medium who holds seances, and he was at my house, and he didn't like these trumpets. So he got some poster board and black tape and made this trumpet, which is simply made out of poster board and black tape, kind of like duct tape, and then he put little glow pieces on the end. So this is what he used in his seances in my seance room at my house, which is only 4 miles away from where you live. And now, even though there are trumpet mediums, some trumpet mediums do different things with the trumpets. So in Kai Mürgi's seance, and he is a well-known German physical medium. As a matter of fact, he's been to the United States a few times. He's coming back next April, middle of next April, to Albany, New York, for a international physical medium conference. So he'll be in Albany, New York, as one of the international mediums coming from Germany. Now, in his seances, he's very German, so the seances are very regimented. So the first part of the seance, you see lights in the room.
Yes.
Second part of the seance, you see they have luminous plaques, and over the plaque, the people in the dark can see forms forming over the plaque, shadows and different physical manifestations of spirit. And part of that phase of the seance, the trumpet will levitate and go around and sometimes touch people, and be indicating that the spirit's aware of who you are and where you are, and then it'll float around the room. When Kai does the trumpet, the voice demonstrating the phenomena is the voice of Hans Bender, who was a psychic researcher in Germany who passed away, I think, in 1969. Anyway, he speaks through the voice of Kai Mürgi. There's no voice that comes through the trumpet. The trumpet simply levitates and notices people and floats around the room. So you see this phenomena in the dark where the trumpet is moving. I have not heard a voice through Kai's trumpet, but it certainly rotates around the room. Now, another medium who's international, Gary Mannion, who's a English physical medium, with him, the trumpet will levitate as well, and you can see it in the dark, and different voices will come through his trumpet. It will also go and touch people as well. And then there's Michael Shane, who's an American physical medium, and he also has trumpet levitation, and you can see that in the dark. And one of the ascended masters, most often Lady Nada, will come and speak through this, but there are many voices that come and use the trumpet for speaking to the audience. And then there's Bill Bolt, who is right in Rochester, where spiritualism basically was born. And he also has trumpet. And his style, each physical medium has their own style of trumpet. The voices come through Michael Shane and Gary Mannion. I've witnessed, they've all done seances at my house, by the way. And then with Bill Bolt, the voices come through, but one thing that happens with him is he uses this type of trumpet, 3 pieces. And when it begins in the seance, it's like this. So what Spirit does is they take this trumpet and they levitate it, but it's not fully extended. So you'll hear this in the seance. All over the place. And then, and it doesn't fall apart. It's floating in midair, and all these pieces are loose, and then, things are happening with this thing. And occasionally, this will rattle, and out of the trumpet will fall apports, which are jewels or stones or coins that will fall out of the trumpet onto the floor. So apports come in many ways in a seance. One way is through the trumpet. You'll hear it rattle, and out of the base of the trumpet will fall apports, which are, an apport is something that was not in the room to begin with, but that appears in the room during the seance. An asport is something that's in the room during the seance that disappears from the room during the seance.
And spell both of those for them.
Apport, A-P-P-O-R-T, something that's brought into the room. Asport, A-S-P-O-R-T, something that's taken out of the room. One of the mediums in Lilydale, Celeste Elliott, was at my house once, and her barrette, what do you call those things, a hair clip, was taken away. Michael Shane once did a seance, and this is why we ask people, don't bring jewelry in. Because you don't want it asported. So
No.
a woman really was attached to her wedding ring, a beautiful diamond wedding ring, which disappeared during the seance. I mean, and she was ready to, put Michael up for stealing it.
Yeah, cry thief.
But she got home, and where did she find it? On her pillow, on her bed.
Oh my.
From her former husband. So this is an apport. An apport is something that comes in. Now, I brought some examples of apports, which can fall out of the trumpet. And they can be large, such as this one. This did not come from a trumpet, but this is an example of something that appeared out of nowhere in the seance room.
And what is that? Is it glass?
It's glass. It's a glass jewel kind of a thing. There's larger ones. This is plastic, actually. This is another apport. This came from a medium when he was having breakfast, and it fell out of his mouth. He said, so it's plastic, but it's the representation. I mean, the thing isn't the value of it. It's how it appears in the room. Although there are ones that have value. There's So
do you think that there's any reason why it would be certain kinds of items and it wouldn't be other?
They're charged somehow psychically with the spirit team. Now, they can do jewels like that. They could usually do small ones. Or stones, precious stones. And
if anybody has questions while we're live and we're able to answer them during this live show, feel free. If it's after and you're watching on the replay, won't be able to answer those questions, but
I don't know if you can see these little jewels in here.
They're like little glass gem
glass gem things. These came from Michael Shane. You can see them now with him in daylight, not through the trumpet, but there's like a vortex behind his teeth, and they'll open up and like a slot machine, they'll fall out, sometimes 90 of them at a time. So we have a sheet to catch these small jewels.
Is there anything that is like uncomfortable or sharp for the medium in that case?
Yeah, when one that is quite large, and this, Wayne Dyer interviewed Michael Shane on YouTube, so you can look for that on YouTube, and you'll see an apport form in Michael's mouth, which is quite large, and was given to Wayne Dyer before he passed as a gift. So you can see apports from Michael Shane in broad daylight on YouTube. Right. So it's not a trick. He's not vomiting them up when these apports come through. Interestingly enough, the vortex is just behind the teeth, and they come through without any saliva on them. They're dry. So, or you can see there's also,
and they're not oily, and they don't have residues of any sort on them.
Exactly. And there's apports you can see with Kaimugi, the lower eyelid starts to swell, and it's a jelly-like thing, but the minute it hits the air, it crystallizes into a stone.
Now, in a little bit, I want to talk about physical mediums and how this all feels to them. But before we do that, can we talk about the apports in the trumpet then? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to get the similar things whether they come from the orifices or whether they come out of the trumpet.
Correct.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to clarify for people that trumpet mediumship is something that's been going on for many years. It's not something that's just a modern day thing, or even in Victorian times that has been going on more extensively. In Victorian times, people really focused in on it. And even today, people are still focusing on it. But it's not something we do here in Lilydale per se, because they registered mental mediumship.
Mental mediumship is Lilydale.
Don't call up the mediums here in Lilydale and ask for
trumpet.
No, trumpet mediumship.
No, but if I can, Lilydale does have a program on Victorian times, and actually in Victorian times, when Lilydale first was founded, for the first 100 years or so, There was physical mediums allowed here in Lilydale. They always say a rotten apple spoils the bunch. So unfortunately, about 100 years ago, or no, less than that, in the 1950s, I believe it was, 50s or early 60s, one of the mediums was accused of fraud. And because of that, Lilydale's reputation, they're conscious about their reputation. So they didn't want any possibility of being accused of fraud from physical mediums. So physical mediumship is not encouraged or allowed in Lilydale, although there are a few home circles that where it goes on
privately. But in terms of the trumpet and working with the trumpet, typically you have to sit for quite some time for manifestations. Most of the time that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
And just to clarify for people that you're sitting usually having this on a table in the center.
Well,
not usually on the floor, right?
Well, actually,
which do you think most people prefer?
Most people, and I've sat with many physical phenomena development groups, and most will have this collapse. By the way, there's a seance cabinet which kind of concentrates the energy, either like a changing tent or a cabinet, which is a small wooden enclosure or curtain enclosure or like a changing tent, and they'll be in there in a chair.
That's a good description.
And
of it, yeah.
inside the tent or the cabinet, this usually is the most common trumpet to be used, and it's usually with a glow band, and it's usually collapsed sitting on the right side of the medium's chair inside the cabinet or the tent. That's how most of them sit. Occasionally, they'll have a group of people without a cabinet and a table in the center, and this will be on the table. Now, I sat, obviously I've described some of the mediums that have been to my house and what their trumpet is. I have sat in my house with table. We sit for table tipping as well. And we put the trumpet on top of the table. So
you get even more rattle.
Yeah, well, we put the trumpet out as a one-piece trumpet rather than in pieces. And what the sitters around the table will do, we put our hands on the table, and that can levitate. And by the way, there are 2 YouTube films of the table completely levitating in broad daylight, one inside my house, one out on the deck outside. And if you go on YouTube and either put a query for my name, Neal Rzepkowski, or Harmonic Fellowship of Light, you will see some film of this phenomenon. But I digress. Yeah. So on the trumpet, the trumpet can sit on the table. Now in table sitting, we have our hands on the table.
For the table tipping.
Table tipping.
But most of the time, if it's on the table, people are not in arm's reach of the trumpet. They're sitting back in their chairs. They're not trying to physically touch.
What we do in my development circle is everybody gets close and puts a hand very lightly on the trumpet. So we have several hands on the trumpet, and the trumpet will start to turn, just like a planchette on a Ouija board. The trumpet will start to move around. Occasionally it's caught up, not often, but mostly it turns around and moves. We did have some sound come through at once, so there are different ways to do the trumpet on the table with a group, each one lightly touching the trumpet. But you're right, sometimes the trumpet can levitate off the table without anyone touching it. We had that happen once in my physical development circle with a medium who had been sitting for many, many years. As you say, it often takes many years for this to happen. But her guide, Roy, had the trumpet, brought it up, and there were 7 of us. And 7 brand new pennies fell out of the trumpet, kind of like gifts from spirit to us. So,
But in terms of wanting to, you have to be a healthy skeptic about these kinds of things.
Absolutely.
And what about low light or having red light?
Low light with a trumpet,
You're not trying to do ectoplasm. You're trying to do the trumpet.
Right. So there are two things that move a trumpet. One would be in the dark with glow bands, you can see. That would be the ectoplasm generated, or protoplasm, some people call it. It's a different type, a little more stable than ectoplasm and less harmful for the medium. But those substances, which are psychic material, will in combination with physical material, will levitate the trumpet. But the other thing is there's a psychokinetic energy that's generated by the sitters, which can levitate a table, levitate a trumpet. So that's another way. And with those type of energies, this will happen in the daylight, or in low light or red light.
But if you're trying to make a distinction of whether spirit did it or whether the group did it,
the two combine. So the spirit, once the psychokinetic energy is generated, spirit can easily manipulate that for information. So pure psychokinetic energy, it happens, but when it's available, the spirit knows, hey, this is easy for us to work with, let's join in. And we all have, as you know, spirit guides, teachers, a whole team around us that work with us. And when they see this opportunity, they'll take advantage of it. So
would you say that trumpet mediumship does not happen in red light or in low light? In general, if you're not touching it.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless you're Minnie O'Hara, who used to be able to have enough spirit energy and her team to work with this in Lilydale in broad daylight 100 years ago. These things would float up.
And are there occasions in your particular circles that people hold hands so that they know that nobody was touching anything?
Each physical medium has their own protocol. If Kai Mugi were here, to prove that Kai Mugi isn't doing this, everybody holds hands, so we know that the whole group, there's nothing going on. Kai himself, one of the last person closest to Kai, has a hand on his knee, and the other person on the other side of Kai has a hand on his knee, and then there's a circle of what's called a hand chain, is what they call it. Hand chain in German accent. Hand chain, everybody, so we all grab hands. And that, depending on the medium and their team, occasionally the team will ask people to hold hands when physical phenomena such as trumpet phenomena is going on in a seance. At other times, there's not a necessity to hold hands, although that invites speculation that it could be somebody that's a plant in the audience. So it depends on the medium, it depends on what's going on.
So if you're wanting to have trumpet mediumship be taken seriously as, healthy skeptic, wanting to make sure that things are done so that there's no possibility of fraud.
Yes. Then
you need certain take those measures.
You do. Yeah. Especially if my nose is itching because one of my spirit guides is here. But anyway.
It's also spring.
yeah. He takes me into trance. Anyway, so if you have a skeptic in that group, now with a group that I sit with regularly, we all trust each other. We know that we're not going to fool anybody in the group. There's no point to it. So we don't need to hold hands because everybody knows everybody and we're not skeptical. But if you have a skeptic, absolutely, Willa, it makes sense that you would want to hold hands or have some other kind of reassurance that the medium isn't doing this. Having said that, we often, many of the mediums, because of this, with public seances where there are skeptics, they will take the chair inside the cabinet or the cabinet or the tent or whatever they're using as a shelter has arms on it. So they will zippy strip, have an audience member zippy strip the arms to the chair and the legs to the legs of the chair.
Bound.
So the medium is bound. Now, that doesn't get rid of the fact that there could be a plant in the audience doing this, but the medium is bound. People are holding hands. The interesting thing that Spirit has demonstrated many times during the seance, in the dark, or sometimes even in subdued light, the zippy strips, which are there, the medium's arm will go right up through the zippy strip. It's called the matter through matter. And so the arm is free, and people from the audience are invited up in the dim light to reassure that the zippy strip is still around the arm of the chair. So the mediums can be freed from zippy strips, matter through matter.
Wow.
So
but why would they do that?
Because spirit takes advantage. I don't know if they're not lazy, but they're energy efficient, I'll put it that way. So they can dematerialize matter through matter, the medium, so that the medium can actually stand up and leave the chair where they were bound.
Or maybe walk through the wall.
That's happened in my house, actually, now that you mention it. One medicine man was there, and all of a sudden, and I lock the house during these ceremonies. We have medicine men can do physical mediumship as well. Not only in their circles they don't use a trumpet, they use several rattles. So the rattles will be levitated and rattle all around the room. You can see them. It's amazing. But anyway, and I lock the house for these ceremonies. So I have my house locked. The seance room is locked. There were 14 of us in that particular ceremony. And the medicine man was tied up in a blanket on a star quilt and laid in the middle of the room. And the drummer's drumming the ceremonial songs, the rattles are over the place, you can see spirit lights. All of a sudden, I hear knock, 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 bang, bang, bang on the door to the seance room. And I'm going, oh my God, who got into my kitchen and into the house knocking on the seance room? Yeah. So through laughter. So I told the medicine man, somebody got into the house. Well, it turned out the medicine man wasn't there. He was originally wrapped in a star quilt in the middle of the seance room, in the middle of the ceremony room. And spirit left the star quilt there, kept his underwear on, somehow got him through solid walls into my kitchen, and he was knocking to get back in. So when we opened the door, there he is, 14 miles dropped. Several people from Lilydale saw this, by the way. They were in this ceremony.
So let's talk about the number of people that would be part of that. Is there a limit, an upper limit, a lower limit, would you say?
It's difficult, especially with skeptics, to have a large audience. It's better to have between 10 and 20. My seance room will fit 20, 21 maximum. Otherwise, it gets unwieldy. And the larger the room, the harder it is to concentrate energy into the room.
Right.
And the more skeptics could be there. So that a skeptic will dilute that powerful energy.
They will.
Oh, absolutely. Just like mental mediumship.
The fear, the doubts, all of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And that happens in mental mediumship as well. So you have the skeptics, and they kind of put static on the line. So it's hard to reach spirit.
That's true.
So I find ideally 15 to 20 in a seance is plenty. A lot of seance rooms are smaller than that, so they'll fit. There's one in Erie that can fit maybe 7 or 8, pushing it 9. There's one in Rochester which can fit maybe a dozen comfortably. Mine will fit 20 in a circle comfortably, but more than that is difficult. Number one, you have to have a bigger room, which is harder to block out all the light from, and it does.
So people are usually trying to block the light in over the windows,
right?
Darkened shades. They're even under doors, right?
Any kind of little light leak. One time,
you don't want to let a mouse through.
Interestingly enough, with the physical mediums, for some reason, glow bands on the trumpet, or even glowing golf balls in the middle of the room, cast a little bit of light, and it doesn't seem to interfere with the...
a little bit of that is okay then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, the medicine man that I was referring to earlier uses complete darkness, and even though it was completely dark one time during a seance, or during a ceremony, he was wrapped up in the quilt. We were all sitting around. Nobody could see anything. He said, my spirits tell me that there is a light in the room. Well, we looked all over the place. What happened was that a little piece of glow tape like this from one of the trumpets dropped off from a seance we had.
Schnibble.
Yeah, just a teeny little thing. We couldn't see it, but Spirit insisted there was a light in the room. Finally, we moved something, and there it was glowing. So we took it out of the room.
And then you were able to return.
And then we were able to return to the ceremony. So certain
ones are picky.
And others don't really care. So it's interesting.
So wooden chairs, metal chairs.
Ideally wooden, but
yes.
There's a medicine man who is also a physical medium, and he had a seance once, and we used metal chairs, and in fact, light was leaking into the room in this particular place near Painesville, Ohio. It was anyway. The light was coming through, and we had originally thought the room was dark, but when you sit in the dark for about 10 minutes, your eyes adjust. Yeah. And this light was coming through. And in spite of the light, physical phenomena happened.
So would you say most physical mediums are working so that they can move more into the light? Or
yes.
Do they not care? And when they
ideally, it's like a seed. Many seeds need darkness underground to sprout. Mm-hmm. But once they sprout, they reach to the light. And so, like a seed, the beginning physical medium, trumpet medium, will begin with darkness, but ideally the goal would be to do this in light, because then there's less room for skepticism.
Yes.
And let me use an example of a trumpet medium, Gary Mannion from England. He is a trumpet medium as well as other physical medium characteristics, and there is a very condemning film of him getting out of the cabinet in the darkness. Nobody could see him get out, but his form got out and made the trumpet move around, and you can see him putting a towel around to create what are called a psychic breeze. So it looks like he's cheating. Well, in fact, what they don't show on that film, because again, people who think fraud, and he was certainly accused of fraud after that very nasty film was released in infrared camera. He was accused of fraud. What they didn't show, to justify their point, they said, this is a fraud. What they didn't show was, to begin with, he was zippy stripped in his chair totally, so the spirit let him out of the chair and used his form to create the phenomena. Since then, he has been tested scientifically by Professor Eckhart Cruz, who's a researcher, to show that the phenomena are legitimate. And he certainly has been working more and more with the light. So a lot of his seances now are done in subdued blue light or red light. Interestingly enough, here in Lilydale, we talk about red light more. But in his seances, they more often use blue light for some reason. It's kind of easier to see in a way. So I've seen things happening in blue light. Now, in one of his seances in blue light, he is zippy stripped in his chair. He uses like a changing tent around his area. And his spirit will say, turn on the blue light. So blue light will be on so everybody can see the tent. Mm-hmm. The tent will lift up enough so that you can see, maybe it lifts up a foot. You can see his feet on the ground, his zippy strips holding his legs in the chair. The tent lifts up and spins around him like a top. Mm-hmm. He's not the only one where this happens. There's another medicine man / medium who does what's called a walking tent ceremony. Same thing will happen, and the tent will start moving around even though he's tied in the chair. So when you want to create something to justify your beliefs of fraud, you can do it. Oh, sure. Even with hands held. I have had Kai Mugi there. Everybody's holding hands. Hands are on his knees. His wife Julia is making noise, so you know she's sitting down. She's not a plant in the audience. Everybody else is there from wherever, and things are moving around. His trumpet is floating around, and people still have trouble believing it, so they have to mentally come up with some crazy idea.
But some of these are filmed, not just with infrared, but in other ways, as much in audio recorded.
Yes. And
all of those kinds of more scientific sides of it.
Yes.
So that they can have some proof at the end that it did indeed occur.
Yes, there's scientific proof. I mentioned Professor Eckhart Cruz, who's a research scientist, has done many studies with several physical mediums, proving that the voices that happen through the trumpet or in the room are not from the medium, not ventriloquy, nothing like that. They're coming from a different spot in the room, and
The physics are wrong.
the physics are wrong. And so he's got several instruments to prove this. He's had the medium sitting on a scale, so that when the ectoplasm is withdrawn from the medium, you can see the scale lighten up and then come back. So a lot of different electronic sensors are put around the room and on the medium. He's done extensive research with Gary Mannion, with Kai Mugi. Michael Shane has been, from the United States, has been examined by him as well.
And what's the decree? Or he hasn't come up with one yet?
Oh no, it's proven. Yeah,
without a shadow of a doubt, he's happy with
Yes.
what he's researched.
Yeah, but of course, the skeptic, don't bother me with the facts. I believe what I know.
Sure.
So everybody, like you said earlier when we were talking before the program, everybody creates their own reality.
It's true.
And you know what? People love to be right, so they'll say, "See, I was right."
See,
Gary Mannion, he's a fraud. See, I was right. Here's the film to prove it.
right.
But if you know the rest of the story and you're a believer,
So some things are taken out of context.
Exactly.
It can happen to anyone.
and
in
that was
regard.
done by jealousy or whatever, which happens in human nature. And believe me, there's a competition between
we
physical
certainly
mediums.
don't want anybody to feel like they were taken advantage of in all of this. So
Exactly.
it's one of those things that when we talk about, because someone does have a question, what are you looking from Spirit to do, to give guidance? What is the purpose of trumpet mediumship? The healing?
Good.
Let's go into
Good point.
to that
Now,
part
what's
of
the
it.
purpose? I
That's
mean,
the
this is like a dog and pony show or a magic show. It's like, look, Ma, look what we can do. We can raise the trumpet. We can give things out of the trumpet, pennies or coins or whatever. What's the purpose of this? Well, part of the purpose of mediumship and spiritualism is to give evidence, not proof necessarily, because again, the skeptics proof don't, but mental mediumship, physical mediumship gives evidence that life continues on a plane beyond the physical. So point number one with physical or mental mediumship is that there is evidence that there is more to reality than what meets the physical eye or the physical senses. Sometimes you need to bring the physical senses into perception by physical mediumship, so everybody in the room knows that there is something beyond what is the known laws of physics at the time that is creating some type of phenomena.
Right.
So that's point number one.
Communication between the two planes of existence. the
Communication, exactly, between the two planes or dimensions, which, interestingly enough, is not limited to human intelligence. There are non-human intelligent entities which are on other planes, which also can manifest in physical mediumship. We have had what's a materialization, you could call it, of what looks like an ET. The other thing we have to realize is that even though spirits have materialized from physical mediumship and you can see them, they use a form that people recognize from their earthly life. We have to remember they don't have a body. They don't look like the physical form that they used to have. But they will appear so that they can be recognized in the physical form that we know. And mental mediumships, and this probably happened to you as well, you have, let's say, a grandmother who's coming to a person, and you describe the grandmother, and the sitter says, yeah, that's my grandmother, but that was 30 years before she passed, because spirits like to look their best when they're coming through. Has that ever happened to you?
Usually I ask them to come forward the way they were when they were here on the earth plane. Last known.
Last known. All right.
So I've kind of preset a lot of that, so I don't seem to have that problem. But then they'll show me what they used to look like, too.
Yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
they'll do that. That's always fun.
Oh, they look gorgeous.
Because they're like, do I really? I'm going to show you what I look like before I die. Oh,
yes.
They're embarrassed. But yeah, I say yes.
Yes,
This is the proof.
Yeah, here's your
And now
grandma.
you can show me what you look like.
Yeah, and that's happened to me. Several mediums it happens. Sometimes they'll come looking radiant and say, well, it sounds like her, but it's not her. And then you can say, well, as years went by, this happened, and but she wants to look her best. So
I mean, we all have a little bit of vanity, I suppose.
Sure. And
Right,
in physical mediumship, when you have images appear, Kaimugi, for instance, will create ectoplasm, and in the red light, which doesn't dissipate the ectoplasm as much, his spirit team holds it so that it won't dissipate, and you'll see pictures of spirit loved ones who have passed on that are recognized.
So in terms of the trumpet, when you hear the voices in the trumpet, what most often do people hear? And what are the voices saying? What's
so
happening?
a lot of times, and this happens in Bill Bolt seances and Michael Shane seances, they will, first of all, it's kind of nerve-wracking to have this happen because it's totally foreign to most people's experience. Yeah. So they'll joke to let us relax.
Well, because that raises the vibration.
It raises the vibration as laughter, but a lot of times, Michael Shane as well, they'll come with a philosophical talk,
an inspirational
which will
message.
Inspire messages so people can live a better life on this earth. A lot of times they will go around to the audience and say, we will help you. If you have a question, we will answer it. And everybody has a turn to ask a question, and the spirits will give some guidance, not commands, but suggestions or guidance to the question that a person has.
And that might come forward in trance, but in terms of trumpet mediumship, how does it come forward?
It comes through the voice speaking through
So do they typically recognize the tonality of a loved one, or is that typically the medium's guide?
It's typically an ascend master or a medium's guide who relays the message from a loved one. And the reason is the loved ones, you need, not only do we need training in physical mediumship and sometimes sitting for a long time, but the people in the spirit side also need how to do this. Yeah. So most of the time it is the voice of the medium's guide that is speaking through the trumpet. Now, Gary Mannion, for instance, he was doing a seance at my house. The trumpet levitated, and there was a gravelly female, kind of a low female voice coming through called Mrs. Barnaby. And she says, can you hear me? So the spirit needs to tune themselves, because...
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, exactly.
Hello?
Yeah, hello, yeah. Can you hear me? So they need to tune themselves so that the physical ears can hear what sound they're generating in the trumpet, so they sort of fine-tune it.
So first there's that.
There's these sounds, which are experimental, and then finally it's, can you hear me? And then, yes, we can hear you, Mrs. Barnaby. Can you understand me? Yes, now we can understand you, because the voice gets clearer with the feedback from the sitters. And then she said, for me, this happened last year when there was a seance at my house. She said, I have a woman here named Esther, which is my mother's name. Esther is telling me that she died on November 20th, 2020, which was true. She said she married her husband, who was nicknamed Lefty, on November 23rd, 1950. So she's giving me evidence that my mother is there. But my mother didn't study physical mediumship. She came to Lilydale, but she needed a relay, Mrs. Barnaby, to give the evidence to me that she was sending her love, and that it was definitely not made up, that these were the dates that nobody...
And you knew that it was coming from the trumpet rather than the medium, because that's a different thing when it's a trance.
Yeah.
You knew that it was coming through the trumpet.
Yeah, that you could see in the dark the trumpet was levitating, so you could see that, and you could hear her voice, which was not from the cabinet where the medium was sitting. It was outside and to the right of the cabinet, so you could tell.
Through the trumpet.
And when the voice comes through the trumpet, it has a tuning. You hear that?
Yeah.
You can hear that when
Going
they're
through
speaking.
the tube.
You can hear the air rushing through the tube. So it's...
Yeah.
That's what this is part of it. It's like the old...
Like old announcements.
Yeah, it's like an old Victrola record,
Yeah.
We please join your mother here. Your name is Esther. So the medium can't do that. So you know it's coming through the trumpet. That's how you know.
Does it ever improve and clarify to some extent? Even beyond that, where it becomes very clear and you don't have that breathy.
I can't remember a time. It's clear. When sometimes it'll get staticky, and you can say we're not
like peanut. Like on Charlie Brown.
Exactly. So we can say we're not understanding you, or can you do this better? Yeah. And they will retune and adjust. But almost always there's that air, that tinny sound, at least from these metal trumpets. Now, I've never, interesting, like I said, Kai Mugi made his own trumpet. I've never heard a voice come out of his. It floats around, but I've never heard a voice. So
this is more for movement rather than vocalization.
So you don't hear that air. So I've never heard a voice.
Imagine if you gave them a bullhorn.
Yeah. And then this one, I don't think I've ever heard a voice from this one either.
So some are just for floating or levitating.
Yeah.
And some are for actual vocalization.
So we were talking about, well, what is the purpose? So the purpose, number one, evidence. Continuity of life, evidence that there's something beyond the physical. There's also healing that comes from physical senses, not necessarily from the trumpet, although the trumpet can float around and touch people, and it's touched gently like this, and you can feel, and it's happened to me.
No one's been cudgeled. No fear.
Oh, sometimes it'll hit you on the head, but nobody's been killed or injured that I know of anyway. No.
You have a doctor on standby, though.
But when you feel that, when you feel that gentle touch of the trumpet, you feel recognized, you feel validated, and there is some healing to that. Yeah. So there is healing that goes on, and of course, hands will materialize, and laying on of hands during a physical mediumship, although our topic is trumpet.
Right.
There are other physical things that happen in a trumpet seance, which have to do with healing.
Yes.
Healing of the emotions, answering questions that are emotionally upsetting, or even advice, suggestions of what to take physically for healing. So these things can happen in a trumpet seance.
Someone's asking, are the objects meaningful to the sitters? Most of the time they are not.
These coins or whatever are gifts from spirit, and sometimes the larger ones are called activation stones. So what they do, they have an energy from the spirits which joins what's called the crystal grid of energy around the earth. It has
that pyramid effect.
Yeah, and so they'll join the group to a universal energy. However, having said that, some coins are significant. One of the coins, Bill Bolt, just last week, Bill Bolt had a seance for one of my Native American friends in Rochester, and he brought forth apports, and 2 old pennies appeared for my guest, who was a Native American, and they had dates. One was 1890, and I can't remember the other date, but the native said, wow, that is the date of birth of my grandfather, and the other coin had the date of birth of his grandmother. Right. So it was kind of gifts from the spirit loved ones to the person.
Right. It would be significant to them.
Another time Bill Bolt was sitting, and a rosary was apported into the room from a grandmother who gave it to her granddaughter and said, I don't need this down there. You can have it.
You can have it.
So she had her grandmother's rosary that the grandmother was buried with apported as a gift to the granddaughter.
And there's never any confusion about who is receiving the message or who is receiving those things. There's never, that should be mine.
That happens. Oh! I've seen that. I want that silver dollar. That should have been mine.
That's mine.
But usually the medium's guides are telling the medium who this belongs to.
Right. So there's no confusion.
That's right. And sometimes, Michael Shane, I'll give him an example. Michael Shane has brought through solid gold ounce coins.
And somebody said,
worth $1,000. They've come through. Not often, but they do. Michael said, I would love to keep them, but the Spirit said if I keep them and they're not supposed to be mine, I will lose the ability to do that. So there are, besides the plastic apports that I showed you in the glass, there are valuable coins that come through. Bill Bolt brought through...
You never know when you're going to hit the lottery.
Bill Bolt brought through some ancient Roman coins.
Yeah.
There was a coin from the Byzantine Empire dated around 1000 AD that came through as an apport. Now, one time Bill Bolt was here. Tom Newman is a medium that lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and has done workshops here in Lilydale. He came to a seance, and on the way to the seance from Rochester, Bill Bolt was driving, and out of his mouth pops a Vietnamese coin, 1956. Oh. And he's going, what's this have to do with anything for? Yeah, what's this for? So he brought it to the seance. Other apports appeared during the seance. And he said, somebody in this room has a spirit. It was a gift, actually. Somebody in this room knows somebody who has a spirit that was associated before Vietnam War in 1956 was there. And Tom Newman said, oh my God, we were just talking. My friend's father was an envoy in Vietnam in 1956. And so the coin was obviously for Tom to pass on to his friend for greetings for his father. Interestingly enough, and this happens in mental mediumship as well, a message is given not for necessarily one of the sitters, but for somebody that one of the sitters knows that passed on, that needs reassurance.
A couple more questions in terms of how long is a session for trumpet mediumship? How long do people have to sit?
It's a good question.
For one sitting.
For one sitting. It's usually 10 or 20 people max in my seance. And the seance can run anywhere from an hour and 20 minutes to a couple of hours, sometimes, rarely a little bit more. Mm-hmm. People get a little bottom sore after that, Okay. Occasionally the spirits will have us stand up in our chairs holding hands so that we can fanny fluff, and sit back down. But seance, there's an orientation, first of all. So because people need to know that they're in complete darkness for a large part of the seance, and they need to know that if somebody needs to go to the bathroom during the seance, it will bring light into the room. People
can't do it.
So it will end the seance. So this orientation thing happens. Then there's a bathroom break. Then we begin the seance. So from the time the seance begins until the end, an hour and 20 minutes,
so don't
2
drink
hours.
anything beforehand.
Yeah, or go to the bathroom.
Go in very dry.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you're allowed mostly to bring, if you really need water, you're allowed to bring it in the room. The problem is, and this has to be...
in the sound, and
Well, no, we always have a bowl of water in the room, which is a psychic conductor. And a lot of times the spirit will take that water and sprinkle everybody with it. Oh. But if you allow people to bring a bottle of water into the room, the skeptic can say, there's somebody.
True.
Yeah, so some of the seances, by mutual agreement, we leave all the water out of the room, except for the little bowl of water, which usually sits in the room or sometimes under the medium's chair. Usually it's in the room. Every medium, again, is different on how they have seance protocol.
Sure.
And some mediums want the bowl of water with a little salt in it away from the cabinet. Other mediums want it under the chair.
Go beyond that.
Okay.
So in terms of the trumpet mediumship, we've covered how most of the time that happens. And this is something you would not want to just start doing without some sort of understanding of protocol and with the right intention. You want to have right intention and right practice. You apply that to mental mediumship, and you would apply that to physical mediumship. So at no point, Neal and I are suggesting that you go ahead and do this yourself without...
No, you need a guide, a mentor.
Teacher or mentor that would help you with this. Otherwise,
ideally,
you want to be setting the scene for success. Yes. And that this is something that is energetically sustainable for you, because physical mediumship, along with mental mediumship, can be very demanding on the medium's body.
It can be, yes.
Yes.
Although some mediums are energized by that. But, but a lot of times, you're right, it takes energy, obviously, to create these phenomena, and cooperation of a spirit team.
Yes.
And the spirit team has to kind of attune themselves to your own vibrations as well. And no two physical mediums work alike. Yeah. And even then, their seances, no two seances are exactly the same, although I can predict kind of what's going to happen in Kai's seances. They're very organized, like a German would do, but there's always some surprise.
Sure. But so keep that in mind. If this is something that is of interest to you and you have never done this before, you would want to make sure that you were under the guidance of another person so that you do this with the right intention, right practice, and essentially don't expect good, but don't expect something to happen right away.
Yeah, it takes
the
time.
The mediums of old and
happen.
even today of modern times, they have learned they have to have patience. And it's about the consistency that mind, body, spirit, you're aligning for that purpose at that particular time so that you can allow that phenomenon to happen.
Yeah, and with Gary Mannion, it only took him a few sittings. Most people take years. It took us 7 years to get the table to levitate, for instance, with trust, and we had it on film, as I mentioned before. One thing I want to mention before we close, from June 18th through 22nd, here in Lilydale, is a seminar on Victorian times physical mediumship. Now, Lilydale does not allow dark seances in Lilydale, so they're happening at my house, which is 4 miles away. And that is going to be in the program when it comes out. And Susan Barnes is the organizer of that, who's one of the people that reside here in Lilydale.
Yeah, so that'll be an opportunity for people if they for in person. That's not a Zoom kind of thing.
Yes, and we're having Michael Shane will be there, Gary Mannion will be there, Bill Bolt. Those are our 3 physical mediums who will be doing seances at my house, but they'll also be doing teaching about all of this for 5 days here in Lilydale pre-season before the official gates open.
Right. So the first day of season is June 23rd, and we're still waiting for the different highlights and workshops that are going to be coming out for the summer. So please continue to be patient. I know that not everybody's able to take reservations to the hotel yet. They're trying to get the website and all of the brochure set and ready to go for everyone. So please, we do appreciate your patience as that happens. And there's a whole big program of 10 weeks this summer, folks.
Yeah.
And yes, people are already booking in for readings. The schedule's getting full for those
even without a
program.
Yes,
people don't know what's going to happen.
People must be psychic. They say, "Oh yeah, I know what's going on.
We know what days we're coming. But let me book." So those are some great pre-season opportunities for you, especially if you want to explore physical mediumship. This side of trumpet mediumship is part of it, and Neal's done a good job of summarizing some of the others and bringing to light some of how that works and what he's witnessed sitting in seances through many years.
Oh yes,
decades and decades of physical mediumship seances.
There you go.
So it's been phenomenal. I appreciate you coming here today and sharing this and the props. I think really help people. You may even see some.
You're welcome.
You may even see some of these in the Lilydale Museum, examples of trumpets that have been used by mediums of the past. So if you're here for the summer season, I encourage you to look in at the Lilydale Museum during its open hours. You can talk to Ron Nagy, the historian, and get more information about physical mediumship and also mental mediumship and some of those artifacts.
Do you have time for a little story?
Quick story before we close.
So James Van Praagh, who has done workshops here in Lilydale and mediumship, James Van Praagh was in the Lilydale Museum talking to Ron Nagy, and on the table was sitting a trumpet like this. During their conversation, all by itself, the trumpet collapsed. So James goes, "Hello." So that's something that happened.
Yeah. So sometimes things can happen in those.
Oh,
ways.
and I forgot to show you one other little trumpet.
Here's
a little
baby,
baby trumpet. So if you're a beginning medium, a little baby trumpet.
if you're thinking that you can't help lift the other one.
Yeah. And when Sue Glazer was in the office, she had a little trumpet in her office, which was a gift for her. So she probably still has that little trumpet.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a very interesting topic for people. I can see in the comments that people are really fascinated by understanding the trumpet mediumship more. So please let us know you enjoyed this episode. And of course, join me next week. We'll have another great topic, another great guest on the show. I believe it's Tom Kratzley. We're going to be talking about elemental healing. So that'll be another thing to look forward to next week. Same time, same place, Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. Thanks for being here today, Neal.
Thank you for inviting me. I
appreciate it always.
Enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good week, everyone.